Alright, Photoshop tutorial, crash course. It's gonna be quick. So, open up Photoshop, right? You can go to your file folder wherever your image is. Click, drag, and it'll open up in Photoshop. First thing you want to do with your image is go to Image, Mode, change it to 16-bit per channel because you have more options of what stretch, edit, what have you in 16-bit. And the initial method is local adaptation. That's a default. As you see, it blows up stuff. And then for this one specifically, I go to Equalize Histogram. You can see a lot more of the image. You can go through the other options, see which one is better for your image. Okay, now that it's converted, go to Image, Mode. This one is in grayscale, so I convert to RGB so I can actually pull out colors out of it. So that's good. We're going to make a copy of the background. So Control J to make a copy. So that way, if you need to delete anything or if you want to start over, you can just go delete everything else and you still have your original. And then hit Control M. This brings up your curves. And then for myself, I have an already done preset called Nebulosity Curve. And it brings it up. That's good. Then I hit OK, hit Control M again for curves, and then from here I'll start to do my initial stretch. So I'll go back and I'll start doing the S curve. I'll bring the darks up, I'll bring the highlights down. That looks good. Then after that I go through each channel. And you can continue messing with the curves like this if you really want to. Just hit OK, it'll apply the curves. You can do it again if you really wanted to. Filter. Okay. And then you want to do a stamp layer. All the layers below your stamp layer are copied into a new layer. So it would be Control, Alt, Shift, and E to make your stamp layer. From here we'll go into Camera Raw Filter. You can do Control Shift A, or you can go into the filter menu, go to Camera Raw Filter. Obviously it gives you the shortcut right there. Okay, then go to your Basics tab. As you can see, I've already cut off some data, so I'm going to bring the contrast out a bit. And I'm going to bring the highlights down as well, that way it's not as blown up and the whites aren't blown up. I always bring the shadows up as well, and that way I can bring out more of the image. The whites obviously don't bring too much because then everything gets washed out. So I usually bring those down a bit. Black I always bring up when I'm doing my stretches. And then usually I don't mess with exposure unless I can't correct it with doing the blacks. So I'll bring up exposure for this one just so I can bring back some data. Texture, obviously if you bring it down it gets muddy and whatnot, and if you bring it up too high it gets noisy. Usually I bring it down just a tad. Clarity I don't go usually above 10. I've seen people do a lot higher. Obviously the more you do, the more noise you will encounter. So I usually don't do a whole lot. Dehaze will bring out the background more. It'll clear it up more. So I'll usually bring it up a little bit. And then when you mess with dehaze, also keep an eye on your histogram because it likes to bring it into the blacks really fast. Vibrance and saturation I don't really mess with right away. Not until I have messed with the curves and everything else to bring out as much detail as I want first. The curves, pretty simple. You can do S curve or however you see fit. And since it is pushing more towards the left side, I'm going to bring up the darks and then bring down the highlights a little bit, and then I'll go through each channel and do the same thing. And there you can go to details. You have your sharpener, which obviously is you want to be careful with. You don't want too much, because if you zoom in and you bring up the sharpness, it's obviously things get a little dirty looking. So usually with sharpen, I barely even touch it, and if there's a lot of noise, and if you do mess with the sharpness, then you're gonna have to mess with noise reduction as well. Color noise reduction we don't need, since pretty good data. Color mixer, obviously, you can mess with the hue, saturation, all that good stuff to your own personal preference. Just hit OK, and I'll apply the camera raw filter. You can see it brought out a little bit of magenta, blues, but it's like I said, if you want, you can keep going through the camera raw filter, or you can go into the curves or levels. If you want to go into levels, just hit Control L, and it brings up your levels. You can go through each channel, the RGB channel, whichever you want to do. But I hope this clarifies a little bit more.